Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 33a, top of the page. Top of the page. I think we can do this in Bevasachas, which means in one shot, one continuous daf. Okay, top of the page, Miklal de Tarvayus de Sfirlu, Tuma de Chuya hi Bitzibur. Top of 33a. Lamed Gimel and Aleph. The Gemara comments, it can be derived by inference that both Abaye and Rava hold that impurity is overridden in cases involving the public and is not entirely permitted. Lema misere kol smichosh Hashem koire alehmani tekef nismichos shirita. The Gemara returns to discussing Ula's statement that partial entry of a ritually impure individual is considered entry. Let us say that a Braita Tosefta in Negaim 8:10 supports Ula's opinion concerning all the cases of placing hands that were there in the temple. I say about them that the principle immediately following the placing of hands on the head of an offering is its slaughter is applied, meaning that these acts must take place uninterruptedly and in the same location. Chutz mizo shoyta b'shara nikano shem tzoyer ha'yochel nikane sham shem ad shema azmin lo b'dam chadaso b'dam hashamo v'i amrit bia b'miktsas no shema bia le'ayel yedei v'lismoch. So this is so, except for this case of a leper who places his hands on his guilt offering, which was done in the threshold of the Nicanor gate, and not in the temple courtyard where the guilt offering was slaughtered. The reason for this is that a leper cannot enter the courtyard until they sprinkle from the blood of his sin offering and from the blood of his guilt offering on the altar on his behalf. The Gemara explains the proof. And if you say that partial entry is not considered entry, let him insert his hands and place them on the head of the offering, and the offering should then be slaughtered in that location next to the gate. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Hamani, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef said, there is no proof from here, as in accordance with whose opinion is this Braita. It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, son of Yehuda, who says that the northern side of the courtyard, in which it is permitted to slaughter offerings of the most sacred order, which includes a guilt offering, includes only the area to the north of the altar, and not the entire northern section of the courtyard. This area is far north of the entrance to the courtyard, meaning more than 22 cubits away. Consequently, even if the leper were to insert his hands into the courtyard and place them on the head of his guilt offering, it would not be permitted to slaughter it there. Vila Eved Pishpesh. Abaye Vrava Dami Tervayu Hakor Biksav Miyad Hashem Alai Iskir Et Kol Melechet Atatnit. The Gemara suggests, but let an opening, pishpesh, an opening be made in the northern courtyard wall facing the altar, where the leper can insert his hands. The Gemara explains, Abaye and Rava both say that such a structural changes cannot be made to the temple, since the verse states with regard to the temple construction, all in writing, as the Lord has made me wise by his hand upon me, even all the works of this pattern. 1 Chronicles 28:19. Which means you can't do anything to it. You can't make a hole through it. Not allowed to. There are those who say that Rabbi Yosef said another explanation as to why the leper cannot insert his hands into the courtyard and place them on the head of the offering. Anyone who places hands on the head of an offering must insert his and most of his body into the courtyard, which is the reason we require placing hands with all his force. Therefore, it is not possible for the leper to perform the placing of his hands properly without entering the courtyard, and the placing of hands on the offering is done instead of the threshold. It's done instead in the threshold of the Nicanor gate. That was the same thing that I asked basically about a few daf ago or whatever, one or two daf ago. It's shechting outside. I mean, it's just the positioning is going to be awkward. It's going to be very difficult to stand outside and shecht while you're. I mean, shechting. I mean, I'm not a shochet, but I mean, you need your full concentration. You need to be over the animal to stand outside it. Doesn't seem possible, but anyway, let's continue. My kasavari mirazash mesoyer The Gemara clarifies what does the Tana of the Braita hold. If he holds a placing hands on the head of a guilt offering of a leper is by Torah law, and the principle that immediately following the placing of hands on the head of an offering must be a slaughter is also by Torah law, let the leper openly insert his hands into the courtyard and place them on the head of the offering, as the merciful one states in the Torah he must do so. Amar Ravada bar Masna gezeiro shmiyar b'psios. Ikidami Amar Ravada bar Masna smichas Hashem tzorich deraisel v'teichas mirchit alav deraisel. Ravada bar Masna says, in principle, that should be done, but the prohibition against the leper entering the courtyard is a rabbinic decree due to the concern that perhaps he will increase his steps, enter the courtyard more than is necessary, and be liable for entering there in a state of impurity. There are those who say that Rav Ada Ramasna says that placing hands on the head of a guilt offering of a leper is indeed by Torah law, but the requirement that immediately following the placing of hands is the slaughter is not by Torah law. Therefore, he places hands on the offering outside of the courtyard. The Gemara raises an objection from a Braita cited previously on 32a. The verse states, and he shall place his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and he shall slaughter the bull. Leviticus 1:4-5. Just as placing hands may be performed only by ritually pure individuals, so too the slaughter may be performed only by ritually pure individuals. And if you say that the requirement that placing hands must immediately precede the slaughter is not by Torah law, then with regard to ritually impure individuals, you also find that placing hands must be performed, since they can do so outside the courtyard. Rather, reverse it and say that placing hands on the head of the guilt offering of a leper is not by Torah law, and therefore the leper must do so outside the courtyard. But with regard to offerings that require placing of hands by Torah law, the requirement that immediately following the placing of the hands must be the slaughter is by Torah law. And now we turn to 33b, Lamed Gimel and Beis, top of the page with the words Ravina Amar. Ravina Amar Linyan Malkut Itman. The Gemara returns to a statement in the name of Rish Lakish in 32b that an impure individual who inserted his hand into the temple courtyard is flogged, as partial entry is considered entry. The objection was then raised from the case of the leper, where he is not liable to be punished with karet for partial entry. And Ula offered one answer. Ravina says that there is another answer. It was stated only with regard to Lash's teaching that one is flogged for partially entering the courtyard while ritually impure. Reish Lakish agrees that there is no punishment of karet for partial entry as there is for full entry. Kiyas Ravin Amar Rayabahu Linyan Tameshinara. When Ravin came from Israel to Babylonia, he said that Rabbi Abahu said that the statement of Reish Lakish with regard to this verse was stated with regard to a ritually impure individual who touched sacrificial food, and not with regard to partial entry into the courtyard, as Ula had said. Dietmar Tame Shinaga B'Kodesh Reish Lakish Amar Eloke Rabbi Yochanan Amar En Eloke Reish Lakish Amar Eloke B'Chol Kodesh Latiga This is, as it was stated, there is an Amoraic dispute with regard to an impure person who touched sacrificial food. Reish Lakish says he is flogged. Rabbi Yochanan says he is not flogged. The Gemara elaborates. Reish Lakish says he is flogged, as it is written, every consecrated item she shall not touch. Leviticus 12:4. As Rabbi Yochanan says, he is not flogged, as that verse is written with regard to touching the portion of the produce designated for the priest, the truma. Reish Lakish, Haikra lahaki hu data. Ha mi boile azaro echel basar kodesh litmar azaro echel basar kodesh minayin. Reish Lakish amar echol kodesh lo tika. The Gemara asks, but does Reish Lakish actually hold that this verse comes to teach this halacha? He requires this verse to teach a prohibition for a ritually impure person who eats sacrificial meat, as it was stated. From where is the prohibition for a ritually impure person who eats sacrificial meat derived? Reish Lakish says it is derived from the verse, every consecrated item she shall not touch, which the Gemara will explain is referring to eating. Rabbi Yochanan Amal Tani Bardala Atya Tumato Mibiat Mikdash Ma Lehanan Anash Vihiziraf Kan Anash Vihizir. Rabbi Yochanan says the sage Bardala teaches that this prohibition is derived from a verbal analogy of the term his impurity, tumato, written with regard to one who eats sacrificial meat while impure, see Leviticus 7:20, and the term his impurity, tumato, written with regard to one who enters the temple while impure, Numbers 19:13. Just as there with regard to entering the temple while impure, the Torah prescribed the punishment of karet, and also explicitly prohibited doing so. So too, here, with regard to eating sacrificial meat while impure, the Torah prescribed the punishment of karet, and also explicitly prohibited doing so. Clearly, Reish Lakish understood this verse as referring to eating sacrificial meat, not merely touching it. Tameh shinag l'kodesh midiap kerach ma'avedish nigia azorech miditakash kodesh l'mikdash. The Gemara answers Reish Lakish holds that both can be derived from Leviticus 12:4. The prohibition with regard to a ritually impure individual who touched sacrificial food is derived from the fact that the merciful one expresses prohibition with a term of touching, while the prohibition with regard to one who eats sacrificial food while impure is derived from the fact that the Torah juxtaposed the prohibition of eating sacrificial food while impure to the prohibition of entering sacrificial food while impure, to the prohibition of entering the temple while impure in the verse of every consecrated item she shall not touch, and to the temple she shall not come. Leviticus 12:4. Tanya Kivate Reish Lakish. The Gemara comments it is taught in right in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. B'chol kodesh lotika azara lo'oichel ata oimer azara lo'oichel o ena ela menugya. There is a brisa that is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. It is written, every consecrated item she shall not touch. This is a prohibition for an impure person who eats sacrificial food. Do you say that it is a prohibition for an impure person who eats sacrificial food? Or perhaps it is only a prohibition for an impure person who touches sacrificial food? Oh, because it says don't touch. So does it mean don't eat it or don't touch it? But how can you eat it without touching it? Okay. Talmud Loma b'chol kodesh lo tiga v'mikdash lo tavo. Makish kodesh v'mikdash ma mikdash tavo sheyesh bo. Okay. The verse states every consecrated item she shall not touch, and to the temple she shall not come. Leviticus 12:4. The verse juxtaposes the matter pertaining to sacrificial food to the matter of entering the temple while ritually impure. Just as entering the temple is a matter that entails a punishment that involves, it's right in the middle of something, so hopefully God willing, we'll start with this idea in the next daf, next video. Right?